Panel, let's first talk about the aspects of the bill that have been made permanent. Could you share with the audience what you believe has the greatest potential for tax savings with these permanent extensions?
I'll start out with that, Chuck. So actually, let's define what permanent is. So through the OB3, and that's what it's being kind of labeled at recently, you'll see permanent labeled and touted all the way through the bill. Well, permanent actually is something that's intended to last forever. Well, in government, that doesn't really happen unless it's a constitutional amendment. We know that didn't happen this go around. So when you read permanent or hear permanent, that can be changed with legislation. With Congress can make a change and it's no longer permanent. But the only thing different here is there's not really sunset provisions. There's not sunsets listed through here. It's all labeled as permanent. But again, when you hear permanent, again, that can be changed down the line. So I wouldn't, in my mind, in our mind, we don't think of it as permanent. The only thing that we really, the biggest change that we think is one of the biggest impactful pieces are the tax brackets. The tax brackets are the best they've been in a number of years. So for instance, in the 80s, for instance, the tax rate was 50%. In the 90s, 39.6%. In the 2000s, 35%. And right now it's 37%. So, I mean, it is great tax brackets right now. Again, permanent, as we hear as labeled through the bill. We think, though, that the middle income tax earners are the ones that really are the big winners. And that's kind of, if you look at it from like if a family made $75,000, for instance, their effective tax rate in the 80s was 30%. In the 2000s, 17%. Right now, it's 6%. So as you can tell, it's a huge impact on the middle income earners. 150K taxable income, their effective rate in the 80s was 33%. 22% in the 2000s, and today's 13%. So again, a huge impact for them. What I like to do, though, is a real-world example. Let's say a couple made $200,000 this year. If they made that back in 1985, say, their income tax would be $31,000 more than what it is today. In the 1995, it'd be $23,000 more and $11,000 more in 2007. So that same couple, if they made $200,000 now, they could have made, $330,000 back in '85, $295 in 1995, and $250,000 in 2007. So as you can tell, the tax brackets are great, but again, they can change. We feel that it's very important to plan now to fill those buckets, especially with your family and you, so that you can take advantage of those brackets currently. Another big win, too, is the capital gains. The capital gains are right now a 0, 15, and 20, and that's permanent. So again, that's a big win. Another big win for you guys that are from the Missouri side of the border, beginning after January 1st of 2025, capital gains, income from the federal income tax return that's subject to capital gains is deducted off of your Missouri state tax return. So it's not subject to capital gains. And so that goes for short and long term, and it's effective for stocks, asset sales, real estate, cryptocurrency, you name it. And so that's a really big win. Crypto. So that's a really big win for the Missouri side, too.
I'll add to your question, Chuck. What's made permanent is, in addition to the brackets, is the standard deduction. So if you guys remember, TCJA pretty much doubled what the standard deduction was. It's now made that permanent. So today it's $15,750 for single, $31,500 for married filing joint. It is adjusted annually for inflation, so those numbers will go up slightly every year. You also get another $2,000 if you're over 65. If you're a married couple, you get another $3,200. That's the standard deduction. The other thing this bill did that's not permanent, that does have a sunset provision, is something called a senior bonus deduction. So it's a $12,000 deduction if both married couple or married people are over 65, or 6,000 if you're single. You get this whether you itemize or take the standard deduction. However, this is phased out if your income is above certain thresholds. So you don't get this additional deduction if your income's over 150 joint or 75 single. So you need to make sure that you're understanding where you're at from a taxable income perspective to know if you're going to get this additional deduction or not. And again, filling up that bucket. If you're not at the 150 yet, what can we do to get you there in order to get this additional deduction to offset that income? So you're going to hear me say this a lot, but it's a planning opportunity. It's working with your CPA and your advisor to do some projections and make sure you understand where you're at so you're taking advantage of creating income, doing Roth conversions, recognizing capital gains, anything you can do to draw in income in a year where we can effectively get your tax rate at a much lower than potentially in future years.
Yep. Thanks, Amanda. I'm going to change gears for a moment away from the income tax to the estate tax. One of the other things that the bill did was it made the estate tax exemption permanent. The new bill raised that exemption up to $15 million for a single person, $30 million for couples. Now, when you hear those numbers, and frankly, for 99% of America, the numbers are large enough now. It is permanent, as Elvin said. I call that permanent in pencil with a small p. So it's permanent, but what it does for us is it allows us to start focusing on what I consider to be the more important part of estate planning, which is if there's no estate tax, you have more money to potentially affect the lives of your heirs. And so legacy planning, privacy, and asset protection for the children start to become a bigger piece of the discussion around. Once we move estate taxes out of the way and we're not focused on that, we can focus on things that are more important relative to what the money does, how it impacts the next generation and what goes down. The other thing I'll just mention, what we've discovered through this, at least my career, when I got out of law school, the exemption was $600,000 and it's slowly crept up to where we are today with $15 million. Most of the older estate plans were based on a premise that we're going to do something to save estate taxes. The problem with that is that most of the time they were sacrificing some income tax benefits. So we would encourage all of you, if you haven't had your estate plan reviewed recently, to go back and have it reviewed, because more likely than not, if it's an older plan, it's a plan based on estate tax savings. And with a $15 million, $30 million for couple exemption, you don't need the estate tax protection anymore. And the old plans essentially gave up some income tax benefits that families could get in order to save, because they were trading a 40% tax for a 20% tax. We don't have the 40% tax. We definitely don't want to give up the 20% savings that we could get. The other thing I'll just mention, for those that are on the Illinois side, the news isn't quite as rosy. It's great on the federal side, but Illinois still has a state death tax. That state death tax focuses on a family net worth of $4 million. If you have less than $4 million as a couple, you don't have to worry about Illinois state tax, at least the way the law is written today. If you're between $4 and $8 million, though, absent proper planning and asset structuring, where who owns the assets, which trust they're in, and the fact that you have trusts that have tax planning in it, you essentially can avoid estate tax all the way up to $8 million. But once you're over $8 million, if you're lucky enough to be in that situation and you live in Illinois, our first advice would be to get out. But our second advice would be there are some things that you can do to lower that estate tax. If you're over $8 million and you stay in Illinois, you're going to write a check for estate tax. But there are ways to substantially reduce the amount of the check if planning is done. So again, federal estate tax is pretty much eliminated for most people, but Illinois folks, we still have a lot of work to do on the Illinois state tax. But I would encourage you, we've had the discussion of repeal come up a number of times during my career, and people would say, what are you going to do if they repeal the estate tax? Will you have anything to do? And I say, well, if you think about all the things you hear about money and trust, that, money causes friction, people fight over it. There's just more now to fight over. There's more planning to be done. There's more asset protection, divorce protection to be done related to the kids. So again, I would encourage you to put on your list, if you haven't had your plan reviewed in a while, to have that done, and we put taxes aside and start thinking about other ways that estates can be planned.